Martin Quezada is a still current senator for Arizona, and he is running to be our treasurer. So he is the sole candidate from the Democratic side, and he'll be facing the result of a primary on the GOP side. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Martin Quezada for state treasurer. Martin, please come on and say hi and introduce yourself, and let's talk about your race.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Quezada. Thank you for having me here. I've been wanting to speak to Tucson for a long time now. So I'm really glad that I was able to get on to this call with you all. I'm running for state treasurer. I have the privilege right now of serving the people of West Phoenix and Glendale as their state senator. I've been in the Senate for the last 8 years, and I served in the House of Representatives for 3 years before that. I also serve as a school board member right now, and I'm on the Pendergast Elementary School District governing board, and I've served as a member of that school board for the last 12 years. And so now I'm running to be the next state treasurer. So I'm really glad to be here. I don't know if you want me to just kind of dive into my spiel, or if you guys have questions or anything specific you'd like to talk to or talk about.
Let's go ahead and hear from you.
Okay.
So whatever you're going to say, and then we'll have questions follow up.
No, sounds good. So I'm running to be state treasurer. I know that a lot of people don't know about this office or don't get all that excited about hearing about the state treasurer. This is not an office that garners a lot of enthusiasm and energy amongst candidates or amongst voters. But it is still a very, very important office. And there's a lot that we could be doing in that office. The fact that we don't know much about our state treasurer now, or what the state treasurer even does, and I'm sure hardly any of you have heard anything much that comes from the state treasurer's office. But the reason that is a problem. I mean, it's a problem that people don't know more about the state treasurer's office. And that's because the people that have used the state treasurer's office, just like the comment said below, they've been using it as a stepping stone and as a platform to run for higher office. So it's really just been a parking place rather than someone who's gotten in there and used that office to actually do good things and be motivated to serve the people of Arizona from that office. So just like was in the comment, Doug Ducey was a former treasurer. He used that office to prop himself up to run for governor. Our current state treasurer, Kimberly Yee, she used that office to prop herself up to run for governor, even though that didn't work and she eventually dropped out. But that's what has been going on with the treasurer's office to this point. But if somebody was in that office and actually used it for its purpose and actually was enthusiastic and energetic and excited about using that office for its purpose, there's a lot of good that we could do for the state of Arizona. And so I wanted to throw my name in this hat because I believe that we can recreate this office. We can turn this office into something that the people of Arizona can really be proud of. We can turn this office into something that proactively tries to help the people of the state of Arizona and provides services and provides information that helps Arizona become a better place. So I want to tell you really quickly what the Treasurer's Office does and how we're going to reform that. The Treasurer's Office has 3 basic functions. Number 1, you're the chief banker of the state of Arizona. You bank all of the state's money and you make sure that money goes where it's supposed to go. Number 2, you're the chief investment officer of the state of Arizona. That means that I would have between 30 and $55 billion worth of taxpayer money that I'm responsible to protect and invest for our community and for the betterment of the state of Arizona. Now that's huge. That's a lot of money. And when you are able to move money like that and invest money and invest it in certain things, you can make that money work for you. So we can actually make our money work for us if we invest in the right way. I'm going to create a responsible investment portfolio that invests in our values and that invests in things that give a greater return. So there's less of a need to tax people and more money can go to things like our schools, our roads, our healthcare system, affordable housing, all the things that we care about. We can create that money without taxing people by having a good investment portfolio and having a wise investor in that position. That's what you can do as a chief investment officer. Right now, we have got over $1 billion invested in Facebook and Amazon. We've got money invested in fossil fuels. We've got money invested in gun manufacturers. We've got money invested in the prison industrial complex. Imagine if we instead invested that money into clean energy, green energy. And imagine if we invested in corporations that respected pay equity, that respected paying their employees a living wage. Imagine if we invested in organizations that promoted more affordable housing. We can move that money around and make it work for us for the things that we care about. So the third thing that the treasurer does is you're the chief financial officer, and that means you have a platform to speak to the Arizona public, to the legislature, to the governor about financial issues, and you can use that influence to influence any decision that has an impact on our financial situation in the state of Arizona. And here's the great thing about that. Every issue in Arizona has a dollars and cents aspect to it. Every issue in Arizona impacts our economy in some way. Every issue in Arizona impacts our state's financial stability in one way or another. Investing in public schools, that's going to create a stronger economy. A treasurer should be advocating for that. Healthcare for all. We spend more on healthcare nationwide. We spend more of our national GDP on inadequate healthcare system. That's far more per person than any other country in the whole world. And despite doing so, Americans have the worst health outcomes and the highest infant mortality rates. That impacts our economy. That impacts our finances. That impacts our ability to collect taxes. So all of those things are things that the treasurer should be speaking out about and advocating for. I would do that as our state treasurer. I would advocate for good uses of our taxpayer money, responsible uses of our taxpayer money, and investment in things that are going to create a stronger economy. Lastly, I'm an attorney by trade. I understand the laws. I understand how to get things done legally. And that's going to be important in the treasurer's office because there's no other candidate that has a legal background like I do. But having that legal background is going to be the most important aspect of running that office. It's not so much having an accounting background. That part's easy. But having that legal background is really important. I'm the only one that has that. And I have the political experience after serving in the legislature. I know how to get things done in a political environment. I know how to be a politician. I know how to balance political expectations with the institutional needs of our state in order to get things done effectively and responsibly. And lastly, I'm a member of our community, and I've been an advocate in this community. So I understand and I share our values, and I'm going to make those values be reflected in the work that I do as a state treasurer. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sure you got questions. I'd love to talk more about any of these issues, but please consider voting for me if you haven't already. I know your ballots are due, or they need to be cast by tomorrow. Tomorrow's the day, right? But after that, we're going to find out who our general election opponent is, and we're going to have a real battle on our hands. So I need your support. I especially need Pima County. I especially need Tucson to turn out and vote and to understand the importance of an office like this that manages our taxpayer dollars. So with that, I'd love to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Martin. It was very informative. I do have a couple of questions for you. Obviously, it's never a great idea in most forums to talk about your opponents, but can you talk a little bit about who we're looking at possibly being the GOP nominees and what your expectation is regarding who might win that contest?
Yeah, so there are currently three candidates for the office of state treasurer on the Republican side. And the fact that there's three says a lot about the incumbent member of that office. The fact that three people are running, that shows that there's already concerns about the way that office has been handled. The incumbent, I mentioned her before, she was originally running for governor. Her name's Kimberly Yee. She dropped out of that race after she just wasn't gaining any steam. But she raised a lot of money for her governor's race and transferred it all over to the treasurer's race. So she's got a nice little pot of money that she's going to use. her and then the other two, all three of them are really Trump supporters. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The other candidate that's going to be her biggest challenger is a state representative named Jeff Wenninger. He's probably even more radical than she is, but they're both very equally, Trump supporting candidates. And then the third is a state Republican Party officer in their party. He was the treasurer for the Republican Party. He's running as well. So they're all kind of battling each other, trying to push themselves further to the right to see who wins. I would expect that Kimberly Yee, the incumbent, is going to pull out ahead and win that. She's got the power of the incumbency. She's got more money than her opponents, but it's not a sure thing. I think it's going to be a closer race than a lot of people realize. And so I'm hoping and I'm expecting she's spending a lot of money in these last few days to make sure she gets out of that primary.
Yeah. Well, speaking of money, how much does it cost to run a statewide campaign for treasurer? And how are you financing your campaign?
Well, I am running as a traditional candidate. I did want to run a competitive campaign. And that means that, clean elections, it works for some offices, doesn't work for other offices. We wanted to try to raise more than clean elections would give us. We're doing well so far. We've outperformed. We've been ahead of the pace of the clean elections funding throughout my campaign. So I think we're doing well, but we still got a long way to go. And so I'm in a good position competitively. Compared to my opponents. I've actually outraised them in the last two election cycles. So I'm catching up to them if I stay on this pace, but I need a lot of help. So I would encourage you to please consider contributing, and I'll put my links in the chat later once we're done.
Please do. Now, let me make it clear to everybody how they participate. Our expectations are that, number one, you use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand. That'll put you at the top of the queue in order, and I'll call on you on the order in which you raise your hands. And I think we have Joe Danishevsky in the house. Joe, you here? He's on mute right now, but let's let him go off mute and say hi. Joe's one of our board members.
Hi, I am ready to go.
Hey, Joe, could you keep a track of the chat for us? And if anybody asks questions in the chat that they don't want to appear on camera, please ask those for him.
Be happy to.
All righty. So let's go ahead and get started with any questions that we have from the audience. Let me lead it off since we don't have any hands up yet. Martine, can you tell us about public banking? I know that a couple of Democrats in the legislature have run bills on public banking last couple of sessions. Can you tell me what public banking is and whether that's an idea that you support for Arizona?
It actually is an idea that I support for the state of Arizona. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it has actually worked in a lot of different communities that have implemented this process. Here's the deal with banks. A community needs a bank in order to be successful. The problem is that in a lot of communities, especially underserved communities, they don't have the resources to have a successful bank because of a lot of, and this is historically because of segregation, because of redlining, especially communities of color. The banks that serve them often continue to take money out of their communities rather than putting money into their communities. So a lot of independent banks have started up throughout history in our country to try to meet the needs and try to invest more into those underserved communities. The problem is that they've never had enough, there's never been enough resources in that community to make that bank successful. So having a community bank from the state level is a way to overcome that, because the state has a lot more access to resources than some individual communities do. I literally just finished a book yesterday about the history of Black banks. There were several Black banks that have been created throughout history in different times of history as well. And those were offered as ways to increase the value of underserved Black communities. The problem is they were never successful because those communities didn't have the capital in those communities to allow those banks to give out loans in those communities. And so without giving out loans, they were nothing more than savings accounts for those communities, which didn't build wealth. So I believe a community bank from the state level can actually provide a better opportunity to build wealth in underserved communities. And that's what a treasurer should be all about, is helping communities build wealth so that we all have an opportunity to succeed in our society. And a state-run community bank can do that. It's not the answer to the problem, but it is a huge step and it is a huge element towards addressing that problem. So I'm a big supporter of the community bank concept, and I would definitely be looking into that more further to work with our legislators. I know we've had a couple from Tucson that have sponsored community bank bills, and I would want to work with them as treasurer to advance that idea here in Arizona.
Just a follow up on that, and a tangent, I suppose, as well. What are the main themes or ideas that animate your campaign? What are you telling voters why they need to vote for you?
So a couple of things. One, we need an advocate for the responsible use of our money. The Attorney General advocates for all criminal justice issues and courts issues, legal issues, right? The Superintendent advocates for public education issues. The Secretary of State advocates for elections issues. What does the Treasurer advocate for? We've never heard them advocate for anything. I believe that that's a wasted opportunity. Our Treasurer could be advocating for the responsible use of taxpayer dollars in the state of Arizona, whether it's ARPA funds that came from the federal government and the governor didn't use very effectively, wisely, or even legally. The treasurer should be speaking out about that. The fact that we sold land to Saudi Arabia for pennies on the dollar so they could raise alfalfa for their cows in Saudi Arabia, that's not good use of taxpayer money. The fact that we've got private prisons with guaranteed bed rates, guaranteed occupancy rates, that's giving away, literally giving away state taxpayer dollars. I would be an advocate for that. I would be speaking out for that responsible use of taxpayer dollars. And that is fiscal conservatism. I don't want us to be wasting money. I want us to be protecting the money so we don't need to be taxing people more. And so that's one big message. The second one really is we need a treasurer that's going to show up. The Republican candidates did a public records request on Treasurer Yee, and this came out during their primary debate. She checked into her office 6 times in 6 months. So they're literally not even there at the office doing the work. I'll be a full-time treasurer. I will be committed to the job, and I'll be protecting our money.
Thanks, Martin. I see Craig has his hands up. Craig Markin, sorry. Could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes, hello, Martin. You
Hi.
talk about the treasurer investing taxpayers' money. Who makes those decisions and who has the ultimate authority? And do politics interfere or intervene like through the legislature?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked it because it kind of gets into the technicalities of how the office works, but it's a very important technicality. So here's the deal. The legislature sets the guidelines for what we can invest in, but those guidelines are very, very wide. So as treasurer, I would have a lot of authority within those guidelines. I also don't make those decisions. I wouldn't make those decisions entirely by myself. I have what's called the Board of Investment in the state of Arizona. That's a 5-member board, and I have to work with that board to create that investment portfolio for the state of Arizona. Now, there are requirements for who sits on that board. They have to be experts in investment. They have to be experts in the management of public money rather than private money, and they have to have experience working with that type of investment system, because the investment of public money is much different than the investment of private money. So those are 2 different worlds entirely. But here's the great thing about it. 2 of those members are appointed by the governor. So I will have no say. If we have a Republican governor, I won't have a say in who those members are. If we have a Democratic governor, I will have a say. But the 3rd member is the treasurer, and the treasurer would be the chair. And then the other 2 members are appointed by the treasurer. So I would effectively, no matter what, have the majority on that board of investment. So I would be able to implement my values, I would be able to implement my vision, and I would be able to move forward with the advice and guidance of some very qualified and some very expert helpers in that as members of that board.
Thanks, Martin. Joe has his hand up. Do we have any questions in the chat there, Joe?
Yeah, and Martine, I want to say how much I appreciate your sharing all the information today. And let's see. If we look at Treasurer Kimberly Yee, she has had politically motivated finances. She sold off all the state's notes it holds and loans to Ben and Jerry's brand ice cream.
Right.
And the company says it won't sell ice cream in Israeli occupied territory. So that's why she sold off all the notes. Do you know of any other instances of blatant political maneuvering?
Well, that's the best example. That's an example that everyone knows about because it did make the news. But I can tell you that the investment portfolio is literally sprinkled with those types of investment decisions. Most, and this is just across the board, most of the investments in the state of Arizona go to, if they're not going to, government-backed securities, which are a big percentage of them, they're going to friends and political allies of the Republicans here in Arizona, or they are being made to make a political point rather than to make an investment decision. And I can tell you that Ben and Jerry's, it's actually Unilever is the corporation that we divested from. That divestment cost us money because when we moved that money out of that, we lost the money that we would have got on that return. So that was a move that definitely cost us money. There's a lot of others. There are some investments that she's making in some new types of creations and types of it's hard to explain what they are, but they're basically new forms of investment entities that are questionable in terms of their legality. And a lot of them are overseas. A lot of them are out of state. And we should be bringing that money closer to home. Like I said, the money should work for us. The money shouldn't be working for Saudi Arabia, for Israel, for China, for other states. I mean, we need to make that money work for Arizona first, and we need to maximize the return on that investment. So my number one priority when I invest will be maximizing our return. But number two, right after that, is going to be investing in the things that we care about and investing in the things that benefit us as a community.
Okay, and that question was from Larry Bodine, our president. We have another question that got somebody's attention, and that was Andrea Kennedy. Say more about selling land to the Saudis.
Yeah, so we have a big patch of land up in northern Arizona that we sold it to Saudi Arabia, and they are growing alfalfa on that land. And they're growing that alfalfa so that they can ship it to Saudi Arabia for their cattle. They're basically feeding their cattle. The problem is we sold that land for very, very low value, lower than it's really worth. So we sold that land for very cheap, and that land is using a tremendous amount of water. So we're literally throwing water away. We're not getting paid for it. And then the results of those crops aren't even serving into the needs of Arizona. It's things like that. And those types of things happen all over the state of Arizona. All sorts of things, whether it's prison contracts, whether it's selling money to foreign nations, whether it's a lot of things in our education budget, the things we just passed in our in the legislature's budget, little shell games that they have with our state's money. A lot of those things are happening and nobody is shining the light on them because we don't have a person in the treasurer's office that is willing to do that. I want to shine a light on all of those things because you need to be able to have the information that you need to hold your elected leaders accountable, because that's your money that they're playing with. It's our money. And if they're doing shady things with it, you need to know about it.
Thank you.
All right, back to me, I guess, Martin. I'd like to follow up on that idea. I mean, I understand that the Saudis were sold state land. Is that correct?
Yes.
State-owned land. How does the treasurer interface with that? Does the treasurer have the decisional ability to decide to sell off state land and who to sell it to? And is that not a market decision? Doesn't it have to be sold at market rate? Why did we sell that land so cheap?
So, two answers to that. Number one, the treasurer is not the sole decision maker. but the treasurer does have a voice in that decision. There's actually another board, another committee, and it's the land. I can't remember the land committee or the board of land management, and the treasurer is a member of that board, and that board makes the decisions about all public land in the state of Arizona, the management of it, the leasing of it, the selling of it. That board makes those decisions for public lands in Arizona. The treasurer is a member of that board, so you have a voice in that decision-making process. I'm not the sole decision maker, but I'm one voice. And yes, there are all sorts of rules regarding what type of sales that we can and should do. The problem is that if nobody shines a light on that, if nobody reaches out to the attorney general and says, hey, I think this is something you should take a look at, then it just flies under the radar and nothing happens with it. And so that's why we need somebody in there at the treasurer's office who's going to say, like, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to pick up my phone and call the attorney general and say, hey, I want to look at this, whatever, if it's a financial move, if it's a land sale move, take a look at this and let's make sure that we're on the up and up. Let's make sure that we're legal before we move forward on this. And I will express my disagreements if they decide to move forward anyway. So I think that it's the lack of a voice that is bringing these issues to light and then holding my counterparts in state government accountable.
Thanks. Martine, looks like we have another question possibly from the chat. Joe, you got something?
Yeah, Stephen Meisel asks, what comes first for you, Martine? Investing your values versus return on investment and safety?
Yeah, great question. Actually, the one that is number one is safety. The first priority always when you manage and invest public funds is protecting the money that you already have. My job is to protect your money first. So the last thing I want to do is lose your money. So safety is number one. Number two is actually liquidity. We need to keep those funds liquid as well. We need to have an effective and a smart amount of liquidity so that we can make sure the money's available for us to do what we need to do. If we need to pay our bills as a state, we need to have that money available. And then third is the yield, the investment on that, the return on that investment. So that the values part falls in line with the yield, because actually what the studies have all shown that when you invest in values, when you invest in things that you care about, you actually get a greater return on that investment. If we're investing in cleaner energy, that brings more money to the state of Arizona. So I see that investing in your values and bringing back a greater return on that investment are one and the same thing, because our values obviously are our values, but those values actually bring a better return on that investment. And that's been proven in other treasurers that have invested in the same way.
Carolyn asks, who advises the state treasurer on investments? Any accountability besides to the taxpayer?
So the person that advises the treasurer is really the board of investment. That's the role of the board of investment, is to help the treasurer make sound decisions with that money. So that's why you want to have good people on that board. And the treasurer is entitled to select two of them. And I already have a great idea of who those people would be. So that board of investment is really important, and that's, you make those decisions as a team. And so there are requirements for the types of expertise that they need to have as well. And so I'm looking forward to really putting together a strong board of investment to help me make those decisions.
Okay, we have another question from Larry Bodine. What about rent control in Arizona? These laws would limit rent increases. Phoenix rents increased by 30% in 2021. More people than ever are being evicted.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I actually sponsored a rent control bill in the legislature this year. And I can tell you that of all the bills I've introduced, and I've introduced hundreds of bills over my time in the legislature, I never got more support from the public, from just random members of the public, than I did for that rent control bill. This is a major problem in Arizona, the affordable housing crisis that we're in. Arizona needs 270,000 additional homes to tackle that housing crisis. And that's according to our own housing department. And that number could actually be growing even higher because of the record number of affordable housing complexes that are being purchased by corporate investors that are then raising the rents and making them no longer affordable to the people that they serve. So this is a huge issue. And I believe that it is something that the treasurer should have number one. That should be one of the issues that the treasurer is working on as a focus in that office. And I'm actually studying that issue right now because there are other state treasurers, Democratic state treasurers across the nation that have put together housing committees that are directly working on the housing crisis issue in their states. And so I'm studying which of those work the best so I can formulate and create and propose my own here in Arizona, because I think that housing is something that we definitely need to be working on. And I think the treasurer is a perfect office to be tackling that crisis. So I'm going to be putting together a plan on how to address the housing crisis as well.
Where do you place water, Martine, on your list of values?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that too. You know, water is definitely up there. It's got to be number one. If it's not number one, I'm not sure what is. I mean, we're talking about our future here. And again, the treasurer can play a huge role in the protection, the management of our water. And here's how. The way that we invest in corporations, you can require them. You can ask them, how are you going to use water if you build a corporation in Arizona, or if you're building a corporation in any other part of the nation? How are you protecting water in that community? Are you being efficient with your water usage? Are you being wasteful in your use of water? And if so, we're not going to invest in you as a state. And so you can make that decision. We can score corporations on how they manage and use water and make our decisions on whether we invest in those based on that water usage. So what that does is it creates a huge influence, and it creates pressure for corporations that want to do business with the state of Arizona to manage and use their water better. And so that type of influence, that type of pressure is sometimes what's needed to make the private sector actually act, because they're about making money first. And if making money means they're going to waste water, then they're just going to waste water. But if they're not able to make money because they're not able to do business with the state of Arizona, they're going to rethink some of those things, and they're going to rethink the way that they use water. And so I think that that's a factor that should be factored into every investment decision, is the impact on our state's water, our supply, the preservation, and the management of our water. So water is up there for sure. It's a huge issue. And again, I look forward to working in collaboration with the Board of Investment and the rest of our policymakers so that we can work together to create the best water policy for the state of Arizona. And here's the other thing: water decisions, the use of water in the state of Arizona has a huge impact on our economy. So nothing is going to impact our financial stability more than our water. So again, using that voice, using that platform to speak out about water and how it's going to impact our economy, how it's going to impact our financial stability, I think is a role that the treasurer should be playing.
Thanks, Martine. Looks like Craig Markin has his hand up again. Do you have a question, Craig?
Yes. Outside of influence in investment, would you have any more influence on private prisons?
In terms of the individual investment decisions, that's pretty much as far as it goes in terms of direct impact, in terms of direct money going. And I speak about the prison industrial complex in general, because actually the privatization of our correction system has moved beyond simply having prisons. They privatize a lot of other services as well. And so all of that kind of feeds into the prison industrial complex. So whether we invest in those products or services is a decision that the treasurer can make. But I think the bigger impact is really communicating to the public about the cost of the state's use of money in private prisons to taxpayers, because the use of private prisons by the state of Arizona is a bad financial decision. It is a bad use of money. And so if we communicate that more to the public from the Treasurer's office, we can create more public knowledge, and we can create more public influence and pressure for the legislature to make some different decisions for how we manage our corrections industry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I got a question. Excuse me. I asked earlier about public banking, but my question is: as things stand now, can the treasurer use his position to originate loans, much like a banker, or can he only invest in existing financial instruments that that anybody else could invest in? In other words, could you work with local entrepreneurs and businesses in order to build opportunities, build housing, build businesses, build infrastructure here in Arizona as the law stands now?
Yeah, and that's that the end part of your question. That's where it's all at right now. Like, a lot of this would have to take for the treasurer to initiate it would require some changes in the law. So we'd have to go through the legislature to create that. But there's a lot of innovative partnerships that we could create with the private sector. And the use of our state money again in the banks that are existing now. The state of Arizona banks with the Bank of America right now, and that's billions of dollars. They don't want to lose that, right? So we could again use the influence of the money that we have to urge them and to pressure them into doing some more those types of loans and creating those types of loan services. I think that is exactly the kind of thing that I'm most excited about if I do end up serving as a state treasurer, is the way we can be innovative and creative in the partnerships that we form and the services that we are able to create in the community that will address actual needs in our community. Again, I mentioned this earlier before, whether it's the creation of smaller community banks that aren't state run, whether it's the creation of black banks or other similar types of banks, or your rural banks, and partnerships to create the ability for them to be more successful than past ones. There's lots of ideas, and if we are thinking creatively, and if we are being innovative, and if we are working on that issue full time and being motivated by that issue, the ideas will come. The services will be created, and we will be able to find those types of solutions. We just need somebody that's motivated to actually do it. And you need to check in more than once a month at the treasurer's office in order to do that kind of work. So that's exactly, I think, what I'm most excited about, is those types of opportunities.
It looks like Steve Early has his hand up. Would you like to ask a question, Steve?
I would. Thank you for being with us. And it's kind of a two-part, depending on how you answer the first part. You say that the state of Arizona banks with Chase. Is Chase a Arizona corporation, or is it out of state?
I believe that all of those banks that we bank with in one way or another are out of state. I don't think any of them are Arizona banks. So the probably question is, can we invest in an Arizona bank, invest our money? That's not as, it's difficult because of the way that our banking structure is set up now. The most successful banks are those big ones, and it's harder for those smaller banks to actually be able to provide the needs that the state of Arizona has in order to be successful. So it would be hard for us to put all of our money into a smaller bank. So those options are kind of limited just because of the dynamics and the logistics of how banks work and how the banking of that money works, and the type of services that we would need as a state. But we can improve those services by using our pressure and really pitting those big banks against each other into providing the best services for the state of Arizona.
You have a follow up there, Steve?
Yeah, I got a second part question then. Every dollar that the state of Arizona makes for Chase Bank goes somewhere else. If we did it in a local bank, that money would stay inside of Arizona. And
right.
We know how much return we can get if the money stays in the state.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's why we want to, ultimately we want to move as much of our investments as we can into Arizona and support Arizona. And part of that is the bank itself. And so, that's something that we will have to, honestly, I'll have to study further to see if that's logistically possible and if it's able to be done in a way that will meet the needs of the institutional needs of the state in regards of the management of our money. So I can't promise you that that's something I will do for sure. But it's definitely something we'll study and look into.
Thanks, Martina. Do you have any other questions to follow up there, Steve?
Nope, I want you to say, tell them thank you.
All right. So I have a question. You said we have at the beginning of your talk, I think you said between 30 and $50 billion under management by the state of Arizona. I note that our current budget is more like 13 or $14 billion. So where does that money come from? Is part of it the rainy day fund? Are there funds outside the rainy day fund that are under management? Can you just give us an idea of what that money consists of?
Yeah, I'll answer it in two ways. First, our state budget in the legislature is actually closer to $18 billion, but they moved it down to 14 by doing a shell game. And I can talk all about that later because that's something that the public should know as well. We're actually at an $18 billion budget.
And they talk about it. Actually, feel free.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. But the 30 to the $50 billion, those funds come from funds that are outside of the budget process in the state legislature. So we have like the State Lands Trust. That's a big one that got a lot of news lately because of Proposition 123. That's a multi-billion-dollar fund that the treasurer manages, but it's outside the control of the state legislature. It's a trust is what it is. And so the treasurer manages that trust and invests that trust. And we have multiple other types of trusts and funds like that are outside of the direct usage of the state legislature. So that's where the money comes from. And also money comes from our local governments as well. Local cities and towns and counties and even school districts, they can invest their money in the state of Arizona. They can ask the state of Arizona to invest the money for them. And so that's one of the things that our current treasurer has done. And she's using that as a way to really lie to the public. She's telling the public that she is overseeing more money than ever in the history of Arizona. That's technically true, but that's only because she just shifted those funds from the county up to the state. And the problem is that when they were at the county level, they were making a better return on that investment than they are at the state level. So I'm not about raising that amount to as high as it should go. I'm about keeping that money where it's going to bring the greatest return. So if that means that money should stay at the county level, I want to work with the county to keep their money there and to bring back the best return on that investment. If it's better at the state, then yeah, I want to bring it up to the state. So part of that money is local money. And she has gone around throughout her term as treasurer and really pressured every county and every city to transfer their locally invested funds up to the state level so that she could claim that she made more money. So it's really a shell game. Again, at the end of the day, it's a shell game.
Now, you were going to mention that the budget is actually more like $18 billion, but
Yes.
They're playing some kind of game. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So what this was, and again, this is something that the treasurer should have been screaming about. What this was is when when the federal government passed, the ARPA funds, the COVID relief package, the federal government signed a contract with the state of Arizona, and that contract said, we're going to give you this relief, this COVID money, but you have to maintain the percentage of funds that you spend on public education. You cannot drop that percentage. It didn't say exact an amount, it just said a percentage. That percentage has to stay the same. So Arizona got a lot of money. We brought in a lot of money over the last few years. So we had a lot more money. We had $18 billion. That would have required hundreds of millions of more dollars go into public education, right? But what they did is they moved that money out of the general fund and they put it into state agency deposits. So state agency accounts, so that they technically did not get counted in our general fund. So it made it look like we had a $14 billion budget, when in reality, it was a lot closer to 18 billion. It was actually 15. It was a lot closer to 18 billion. It was literally a shell game. They moved that money over so that it would not count for the amount of money that they would have to. They moved that money so they wouldn't have to invest in public education. And so when you move money out, that means a lower money equals that percentage threshold, right? And this is just kind of basic math. If there's less total money, the percentage that you maintain spending is going to be lower as well. So we maintained that percentage only because we cut off a bunch of that money.
Wow. As a former prosecutor, that smells a little bit like fraud. Is anybody suing the state about that?
Well, again, that's something that the treasurer should have informed the attorney general, and the attorney general should have been looking at that really closely. I'll tell you what is more likely to happen right now. The federal government may look at that and say, no, you guys aren't following the contract. Like, that's a shell game. And the federal government may hold us accountable. The federal government could sue us and demand all of that ARPA money back. So Arizona is in a very vulnerable place right now where we may have to pay back a lot of that ARPA money. And that is a legitimate possibility right now. To be honest, I don't think that'll happen because, the Biden administration they're not going to do that to the state of Arizona. That would hurt a lot of people, But I definitely think that the Biden administration is going to be aware of it, and they're not going to like it very much. And so how that plays itself out, we're going to have to wait and see. But definitely, it puts us in a very precarious and vulnerable legal situation, again, which is why you want a lawyer in the treasurer's office as well.
Yeah, so Ducey and you are playing something of a game of chicken with the Biden administration in misdirecting those funds against the contract. Can you talk a little bit about some of the long-term assets that Arizona has, specifically the state land trust? Because that's a huge pot of money. I know that there was some recent changes by the Ducey administration in the formulation for how that money is invested and spent and how much has to be returned to the state. Can you talk about that a bit and what concerns you have around that?
Yeah, and that was essentially Proposition 123, and that was to settle the lawsuit that our education community had against the state of Arizona because we weren't funding inflation. According to the initiative that the people of Arizona passed, required the legislature to continue to raise the amount of inflation for public schools. That funding had to be increased because the voters approved that. The legislature said we're not going to do it, and so there was multi-million dollars that the state was indebted to our public schools, and so to settle that lawsuit, Doug Ducey came up with the idea to take some of the money from the state land trust. And so to kind of explain what that is, the state lands trust, that money is money that the trust is there so that we were not supposed to take any of that money because the interest on that money is supposed to be a flow of money to our public schools. So that money already goes to our schools. So what Governor Ducey did is he increased the amount of money that we could pull out of that, and dangerously close to dipping into the actual trust. But he increased the amount of the proceeds of that investment that would go to our schools, and that money became the Prop 123 money that went to our public schools. I didn't think that was a good idea when we initially passed Proposition 123. I was very concerned about it. I thought that it could harm the trust because basically we're using public school money to pay public school debt. We're using our own money to pay us back the money that we owe. And so that, like, if we're the schools, right? And so it wasn't a good idea from the beginning. Since then, the money didn't really dip into the trust as much as we expected it would. We have maintained the trust as it is. So it has been successful as an idea, as a concept. But here's the big thing about the next treasurer. Proposition 123 is going to expire at the end of the next treasurer's term in the next 4 years. So we're going to have to replace that money somehow. So that might mean, again, using the state land trust in some way, shape, or form. So the next treasurer is likely going to have a very big voice in terms of what that next step for public school funding is going to be. And I would expect that there's going to be an effort and a big push to use the land trust again. So in order to protect that trust, and in order to say whether that's a good idea at all, that next treasurer is going to have a strong voice in that discussion. And I'll give Jeff DeWitt, who was the treasurer at the time, I'll give him a lot of credit because he raised a lot of concerns about the use of that money. And the next treasurer is really going to have to do the same thing. And so if I'm there, you can count on me ensuring that we're doing what's best for students and we're using that money effectively and wisely in terms of protecting that money.
Looks like Steve Early has his hand up. Do you have another question, Steve?
I do. With the treasurer, as the state treasurer, would you have had any say in the way Ducey spent the billions of dollars that the federal, or millions of dollars that the federal gave him for COVID?
That's one of the examples that I always give is the governor's use of those ARPA funds, and technically no, because that money went straight to the governor. Even the legislature didn't have any say in how the governor himself was the only one that got to decide how that money was used. Now that's a bad precedent. I mean, the federal government kind of created that type of system. I don't think that's a good system, but the treasurer could have been a voice in terms of the use of that money. And I can tell you in other states, what the state treasurers there did is they went on tour with the governor or with members of the legislature. They went on tour around the state as the state treasurer to ask the public, what's the best way that we should spend that ARPA funding? And then they produced a report that they gave to the governor to really pressure him into using that money effectively. That's something that I would have done. I would have, as a state treasurer, I would have gone out to the community and asked you guys, what do you need? How are we going to best meet your needs? And how are we going to best address COVID? And what's the best use of these millions of dollars that we got from the federal government? And then I would have held the governor accountable for it. I would have spoken out. I would have said, here's what the community wants. Here's what the community needs. Now, governor, it's up to you to meet those needs. And if you don't, we're going to hold you accountable. And so I think that that's something that the treasurer could and should be doing.
Hey, Martina, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or any hands up, so I'm going to interject a question of my own here. What role do you see for the treasurer and its management of state funds in helping us combat climate change and global warming and greenhouse gases?
Yeah, no, a great question. And I think that this is going to become a big issue in the general election. Because if you've seen my opponent, I don't know if you've seen he's got signs in Pima County, but my opponent, Jeff Manager, no woke investments. What that actually means is it's a campaign against a term called ESG investment. And ESG investment is a philosophy amongst investors throughout the nation, both progressive and conservative investors, that the idea is that when you make an investment, you not only look at the length of time of the investment, you not only look at the direct return on that investment, the percentage of that return, but you also look at the impact of that investment on the surrounding community and the costs that it has on that surrounding community. And so the thought with that is that the impact to our environment is a primary focus, because that is a financially irresponsible investment. If you're putting money, even if you're getting a good technical return on that investment, if you're then costing those same taxpayers because of the cost to our environment, the dirty air, the dirty water, the destruction of land, the waste of water, and those things have a huge financial cost. So if you're doing that, you're basically wiping out the original investment that you had in the first place. So that is a philosophy that there is a score that is put on every investment, every corporation, to see how they impact the environment, to see how they impact the society, to see how they govern their own decisions about those types of environment and climate issues. Now, the Republicans hate that. They think that that's irresponsible. They don't like it. Even though it actually is financially responsible, they don't like that because it's quote unquote woke. So that's going to be a big campaign issue in the general, because I'm all in favor of ESG investing. I believe that it's smart. I believe that it's financially stable. I believe that it's actually financially beneficial for the people of Arizona. You make more money when you use ESG scores as a guide to and a factor to consider when you make investment decisions. It's not the only factor that you consider, but it's one factor that you consider amongst many. And I think that that's an important factor that we should be considering. And so I intend to use that philosophy, and they intend to really push back against it and refuse to use that philosophy. So what they're basically telling us is, one, they're going to be bad managers of money, and two, they have zero interest in protecting our environment, improving our climate, or protecting our water when they make investment decisions in that way.
Yeah. Just for everybody's information, ESG stands for environmental social governance. And it comes down to the basic idea that, major investments can have externalities that are unexpected or unanticipated. They can basically put a hole in your investment bucket somewhere else that you didn't expect. And so, especially for a state government, it's important to look at those possible externalities, so you're not hemorrhaging money somewhere else that you could be saving if your investment was right environmentally, socially, or governmentally.
Exactly.
Looks like we have another little question in the chat here. I'll just go ahead and ask it myself. Steve Mizell asks, "What's your view about investing in desalinization?"
Good question. I think that, once we, I believe that we should be working with, the experts of water in the state of Arizona. So I think that this is a partnership that I've actually been talking a lot with Lauren Kuby about, who's running for a corporation commission. We really want to develop a plan where we work together, because the corporation commission overlaps in a lot of ways with the treasurer's office in the management of water. And so I'm hoping to sit down with her and to create an actual plan of where we invest money in terms of how it's going to have the best and the most positive impact on water. So I don't have a direct answer yet, but that's something that we're going to be working on, and that's something we're going to be making investment decisions based on what's best for water in the state of Arizona. There's a lot of water experts that I believe that the treasurer should be coordinating with. Our Department of Water, and our Corporation Commission, and our legislators as well. And I think even academia, and people like Terry Goddard, who sits on the water board up in central Arizona. I had a great conversation with him about these water issues as well. And the plan, if I'm elected treasurer, is to collaborate with each and every one of those people who are they're smarter than I am about water issues, and to develop a plan that's going to respect our water, protect our water, and manage our water in the best way. And so that's coming.
I want to thank you, Martin, for joining us for a smart and substantive discussion of the issues facing Arizona, especially as treasurer. I'd like to invite you to tell people how to get involved with your campaign, how to support you, and how to contact you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Please go to my website. It's martinquezada.com, and log on there. I really need contributions. That's what I need the most, to be honest. I need those contributions because I'm about to head into a really tough general election cycle. What's toughest the most is bringing attention to this office, because this one flies under the radar, and people think treasurer, people think Republican. Republicans are good with money. That's the concept of people out there.
Not true at all.
Yeah, even though the opposite is actually true. And even though Democrats, each state that's elected a Democrat treasurer, their finances have actually stabilized and improved. Their economies have improved when they have Democrats as treasurers. So I need to correct that type of ideology out there and correct that philosophy out there. And so I need resources to help get that word out there. So your contributions would be huge. But I need volunteers as well.
What's the maximum contribution you can accept, Martin?
Yeah, and I can. I'm running as a traditional candidate, so I can accept contributions up to $5,300, and I'll put a link in there, and that'll be a huge help. But I need people that are in different parts of the state that are. If you're working on a local campaign, I want to support those local candidates as well. So partnering with my campaign, if you're working on a school board race, if you're working on a legislative race, if you're working on a county race, I want to support good candidates up and down the ballot as well. because I believe that statewide officers, we have that, it's an obligation and a duty that we should be supporting lower ballot races as well. So if you're working on one of those, reach out to my office and let me know how we can collaborate.
Great. Thanks so much for appearing with us today, Martin.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Talk to you later.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.